Hello again, and welcome to the WSBI ESBG Exchange podcast for Thursday, 16 May 2019. I'm James Piper, Senior Advisor for Communications at the two associations, with a mission to help savings and retail banks thrive. This is episode 7, the second of many podcasts scheduled for 2019. Like every podcast, we highlight news from the world of savings and retail banks in some 80 countries around the world. This episode focuses on Africa and Scale2Save, a program designed to establish the viability of small-scale savings in 6 African countries. It's a partnership between WSBI and the Mastercard Foundation. Joining us now in Studio 4A is Ian Radcliffe, Director at WSBI and the person who leads the Scale2Save program. He is here to tell us more. Ian, thank you for coming. Scale2Save is at its midpoint, so let's talk about what's been done so far and what's ahead.
Good. As you say, this is great timing because we are at the midterm in the program, and so I want to take a moment to look backwards, but also to look forwards. And in fact, even before going into that, I'd like to go back a little bit even further to put the whole program in context. Obviously, the program fits within WSBI's primary mission, which is to help savings and retail banks thrive. But we also have to see it as a continuation of, frankly, almost 30 years of delivering projects in around 70 to 80 countries around the world, which all fell under the broad umbrella of economic development and poverty alleviation. I'm guessing it's around about 2003, we coalesced around the what was then a fairly new policy agenda item, which was financial inclusion. And in 2008, we started a project in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which went through until 2015, which was focused on doubling the number of savings accounts for poor. And so the current program is a continuation of that. And the learning that came out of that program really guided the way this program was formed and created. In particular, we developed what we now call our mantra, which is relating to usability, affordability, accessibility, and sustainability. Now, in that program, we worked out how to address the problems of usability, affordability, and accessibility, but sustainability remains still an open question.
So this is the structure that's laid out in a report that we've done recently on savings and retail banking in Africa.
Yes, indeed, and I'll be coming back to that structure in just a few moments. Mm-hmm. But this whole question around sustainability that was the open question led us to the problem statements which underlined the current program which we're doing with the Mastercard Foundation, which was, firstly, Mastercard Foundation focuses on Africa, so whereas the Gates Foundation program was a 10-country program which also covered in Latin America and Africa and Asia. This one focuses purely on Africa, and so we were looking at the problems of high poverty rates and financial exclusion across the sub-Saharan Africa, and the correlation between those aspects of financial exclusion and poverty, mm-hmm. and that formal savings rates are very, very low. We also recognise that market potential of various low-income segments to save is poorly understood by formal financial service providers, and customer and potential customer needs and how much they can afford to pay to meet those needs were not adequately reflected in business models, customer interfaces, and various other interactions. And all that resulted in poor customer experience and gave rise to very high instances of dormancy and inactivity in bank accounts. That, in turn, represents a significant drain on costs and thus undermines potentially sustainable business cases. Hence, we then came to the core objective of this program, which is to establish the viability of low balance savings accounts and use of, it's all a bit wordy, and use of customer-centric approaches to address barriers faced in access, usage and affordability of saving services. So this program is built around 4 main components. Firstly, to provide technical assistance to banks in 6 countries, in Côte d'Ivoire, Morocco, Nigeria, Kenya, Senegal and Uganda, to develop saving services that are valued by low income clients. And then we're looking to conduct research and share lessons between our partner banks, and then beyond that communicate the learnings to WSBI members and the wider sector, which includes multilateral organisations and other actors around the world. And finally, the 4th component is all about monitoring and evaluating, so measuring the impact of projects.
So right now we're in not the early stages, we're at the midpoint. So tell us a little bit about the research component, if you could.
Okay. Well, the research component, there are 3 layers. Firstly, at individual country level, we're performing market research, and that is being conducted within the actual projects that we're performing within the countries. Secondly, we're doing some household level research. And thirdly, we're performing youth research. I'll come back to this in just a moment. But then beyond that, there's something else that we're doing, which is we're doing what is called an annual State of the Sector report, where we have just published, or actually at the end of January, we published the first of these reports. It's going to be an annual run, so there's going to be going through until 2022. Whether or not it goes beyond that, we'll have to see. But looking at the state of savings and retail banking in Africa. So we published the first one this year. It was, if you like, the benchmark, where we did a survey of WSBI members across Africa. We received, I think if I remember right, it was 24 responses from our 30-odd members in Africa, and that gave us a snapshot of how members are performing in their efforts.
So, what was the main conclusion? What was the main conclusion of that report?
It basically confirmed what we thought, which is that banks, savings and retail banks, are still struggling with customer centricity. We find that although our member banks are offering a very broad service to customers, which that really shows a real commitment, nevertheless those products are not necessarily designed around customer needs.
So let me get this straight. So they're shooting arrows, but they may not be hitting the target.
That's pretty just about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The products are not designed in line with what customers are telling them they need. That gives rise, as we had said from the very beginning, to account inactivity, poor take-up, and then we see that affordability, the sort of pricing models are not linked to what people can afford to pay.
So what should banks do to remedy this?
Customer centricity is always a problem. We've been doing some workshops with our members on this, but a lot of it focuses around, firstly, leadership. Then there's the culture of the organisation, and that feeds through not just to frontline staff, but also right the way through the whole organisation. So there's organisational change, operational change, which is needed, and everything has to be focused on the customer.
Great. Now, this report is one of many reports coming down the pipeline, but who should read a report like that? That,
primarily, in the first instance, is our own membership. That's if you like, the number one audience. Then beyond that, we move into into the wider interested community. And so it's something which, for example, a donor community at large can learn from, because whatever is happening with our own membership in Africa is probably also happening with other banks as well. And then beyond that, we're going into academics and so on that are constantly studying this sort of activity. Now, in as I say, this is an annual study. So this year we're again repeating our survey of WSBI members in Africa, but we're working with an external firm, Finmark Trust, to broaden that to non-member banks in the same countries as our own members, so that our members will be able to benchmark themselves against what's happening elsewhere in their countries. And also we're going to have a look at one or two non-member countries as well, to see what's happening there, and see whether there's any broad conclusions that we can draw. But the whole aim this year is to drill down further on customer centricity, and then next year we'll probably in the edition that comes out next year, we will probably pick up on one particular aspect of customer centricity and drill down further on that.
That research is being done by yourself as well as two colleagues who work with WSBI Advisory Services.
Yeah, that's Wesselina Angelo and Celine Stevens. But the team is broader than that as well, because we have, apart from Wesselina and Celine, we've also got two technical specialists, one who is based in Dakar, that's Agnes Fowl, and the other one is based in Nairobi, and that's Kimati Gitachuri, and they are the technical specialists that are working on a day-to-day basis at a technical level with the partner banks we're working with.
Mm. So tell us a little bit more about other research coming down the pipe.
Okay, well, I think probably the biggest thing we're working on at the moment is on youth. Now, one of the conclusions, and I'm going back to where I started in this, was that that came out of the earlier program, was that particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a very large number of young adults who are still living in either a parent or a guardian's home. Now, we realised that this was a largely untapped market, and one of the things that looking around, we could find no research whatsoever into how they conduct their financial lives, what sort of transactions they do, what their financial activity is at all. So with this program, we are conducting that research, and we're doing this sort of research has got two aspects. It's got a qualitative aspect where we're working with a firm in the Netherlands to look at this, but we're also doing a quantitative work where we are working with a company called Lift, which is doing financial diaries work in three countries, in Morocco, Nigeria and Senegal.
So that research is coming. We're scheduled to publish some of that later on this year, from what I understand.
That's
so we
correct.
really look forward to that. Beyond the research, there are these moments where the projects and the people involved with those projects interact, exchange information. So I know Scale2Save recently held a peer review workshop in Kenya. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're aiming to do a workshop roughly twice a year, where we bring all our partner banks together to share the experiences from their own projects and to learn from each other, and also it gives us an opportunity to present things which are happening at a more international level, which could also be relevant to the projects that they are performing. So we had about 40 people came together in Mombasa, It was a 3-day workshop. The first day we were looking at aspects such as the customer experience. This is again coming back to what we've been talking about
with the report,
study and so on.
Yeah, customer centricity.
Yeah. Then we looked at digitization and also agents banking. And then on the second day we took the participants out of the conference or the event room to see what is actually happening in the field. And so we went and visited 7. Not everybody visited 7, but we visited a total of 7 village groups to see what our Kenyan member KPOSB is doing to link with village groups and provide them with a financial service. On the third day, we brought the participants back to the events room, the conference room, and we had some breakout sessions on business case modelling and digitization again, drilling down further into that.
What I do know is that in the coming weeks we've prepared a couple of videos that our listeners will be able to watch. So one will be on those village groups that we visited, and the other is on the peer review workshop. So look out for those. They'll be available on YouTube and on the WSBI ESBG website.
And this is great because this was a continuation, if you like, of a series of videos which we are producing. The first one, which we did in Morocco, which just showcased the project we're doing with Al Barid Bank, and then later in the year we'll be doing some more, which are linked to the youth research that we're doing in the 3 countries in Africa.
So look out for those. It's on the YouTube channel for WSBI ESBG, and there's a sub channel called Scale2Save, or just type in search for Scale2Save videos and you'll see the whole library of videos available. So we've done a lot so far, but we're at the midpoint, so now it's time to assess what we're doing. And I know an evaluation is being conducted by Mastercard Foundation. So could you tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important?
Okay. All programs have to be evaluated, that's obvious, and this program is firstly having its midterm evaluation, and there will be at the end of the program another evaluation. Now this particular one is beginning to the aim of it is to review our core theory of change, which we drafted right at the beginning of the program when we were in discussion with Mastercard Foundation. That theory of change is something which looks at 3 levels. It looks at the client level, the institutional level, and the ecosystem level, and it addresses what activities we're doing, what the outputs of those activities are, the outcomes, and the impact. And when we're looking at the ultimate impact of this whole program, what we're hoping will happen, it's not something which we can control, but we will certainly measure to see whether or not, to what extent our activities have contributed to it, but that sustained access to and use of savings mechanisms contribute to improved well-being for customers. And measuring the well-being of customers is always a challenge, of course. Firstly, we have to define exactly what we mean by well-being, but it involves all sorts of aspects relating to their economic activity, and their lifestyle and things of that sort.
So that evaluation is going to take a look at whether this theory of change, which I believe is about 30 different elements within it, if it's standing tall amongst all the projects that are going on in Africa. That's interesting. So now the future, what will we see in the coming months for Scale2Save? Okay,
well the first thing is, number one, we are going to continue with our the projects that we are performing in these 6 countries, and so we've got, at the moment, we've got partnerships already signed with 7 banks. We are very shortly going to be signing 2 more MOUs, Memoranda of Understanding, with Centenary Bank in Uganda and also with Finco Uganda. So that's the first thing that's coming up, and we will be continuing to work with our partner banks to help them to achieve their goals as well. Secondly, we're going to be continuing the work on research that we're doing on the various things, on the three aspects which I mentioned: market research, household level research, and youth research. Continuing our work this year to produce the next State of the Sector reports, which will be published, we're aiming for November. On the sharing lessons, our next peer review workshop, we're planning to take place in Washington, D.C. in October. And that will take place alongside WSBI's General Assembly, which is also taking place there. In terms of communication to the wider sector of the sort of learning which is coming out of the programme, in just a couple of weeks, two or 3 weeks' time, we'll be doing a workshop at the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg, and where it's early stages yet, it's not yet confirmed, but I'm in discussion with the World Bank to see whether or not we can have a side event to their annual meetings, which take place in October. And then, as you rightly mentioned, the midterm evaluation, that will continue until around about October, November, when their final report is due.
Well, it looks like a full agenda indeed. So we got videos, workshops, sharing our efforts, sharing it with all of our stakeholders, those who really care about what we're doing. So this really looks interesting. It's really good stuff. And Scale2Save marches on. So for anybody who's out there, we want to say that, Scale2Save is available. All you need to type on your search engine is Scale, the number 2, and Save, and you'll go right to the WSBI ESBG website to learn more. It's a full agenda indeed, with lots of activities taking place now and in the coming months. So Scale2Save marches on. Ian, before we leave this podcast, tell us more about the projects. What's going on the ground?
Okay, well, I think this is if you like, core to the whole program, because this is where we get our evidence from. Firstly, we're working in 6 countries, which I've already mentioned. We have 7 partners signed up. I won't go through every individual project, but just to give you a flavour, I'll just pick up on a couple of those. In Nigeria, we're working with 2 partners there, with Lapo Microfinance Bank and FCMB, which is First City Monument Bank. I'll just say a word about the FCMB project. And firstly, even before that, about Nigeria itself. It's a massive country with the population of about 180 million people, of which about 104 million people are above 15, which is the sort of age when we start talking about financial activity. There's 70% of the population is below the poverty line, and 60% of the population is financially excluded. So it's a massive challenge to do something there. Now, the project at First City Monument Bank was one of the later ones that was signed, but it's really interesting because it's one where they're rolling out a savings product, which is called Campe, which is tailored to the needs of farmers, and it's operating through technology-driven agent banking propositions at their point of sale, and using other mobile technologies as well, which is where everything is heading in the financial inclusion agenda. The other one I want to mention is in Morocco, which is WSBI's member there with Al Barid Bank. Now, again, just to give you the context in the country, there's a population of around 35 million people. About 26 million of them are aged above the age of 15. It's got a different economic structure. It's more developed than Nigeria. So there's only about 15% below the poverty line of the population. But despite that, 72% approximately of the population are financially excluded. So again, there is a big challenge. Now, the project at Al Bared Bank is focusing on digitising value chains. Now, that is something which is quite innovative generally, I think, in the financial inclusion world. So what they're aiming to do is to partner with FMCGs, fast-moving consumer good companies, and then digitising the whole value chain right through to the merchant and to the end customer. Now, it's been very interesting getting started, and the project has faced a few challenges, which are particular to Morocco, just simply in partnering with FMCGs, because we suddenly come across the context of the regulatory environment, where the country has introduced new regulations around e-invoicing, which has caused a lot of upset amongst some of the small merchants, which are at the bottom of the chain, if you like. And that has caused some reluctance on the part of FMCGs to partner with Al Bared Bank. So as we move on, we find these projects, they're all individual. They all have their individual challenges, and the banks, and we're working with the banks to work out how can we get around these challenges and still move forward and achieve the overall goals. Now, I should mention that we do have a numerical target for this whole program, which is not massive in terms of when you think we're talking about 6 countries, when you're talking about countries the size of, say, Nigeria. But we're aiming to put on 1 million new customers under this program, and it's something which we always have to keep an eye on.
Well, we look forward to the progress that's being done on the ground. Ian, thank you so much for an update on the projects that are taking place within the Scale2Save program. Scale2Save marches on, and to learn more about Scale2Save, just type it in on your search engine, Scale, the number 2, Save, all one string, and you'll learn all about Scale2Save. You can also click below on this podcast, and you will have links to the Scale2Save program. I'm James Piper, signing off. Special thanks to Alexander Duchamont, our technical wizard, for making it happen. And again, thank you, Ian Radcliffe from WSBI, for joining us for episode 7 of WSBI Exchange Podcast.